DanDaDan, 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 DanDaDan. It's Romania Black, and we're on episode 5 of DanDaDan, and I'm really excited. I feel a lot better than I did last week. Last week, DanDaDan episode 4 was just what the doctor ordered. I was just coming off of being sick, and I was feeling good, and I was like, I want to watch something that's gonna make me feel really good, and that hit the spot. And I was so excited. So this week, I'm like, yes, I woke up this morning, I was like, it is time to watch some DanDaDan and be excited. So I hopefully I didn't realize how red last episode would be, so I had like a red shirt on. The thumbnail was just red. It just looks coated in blood. It looks like the King Charles portrait. But anyway, I've got some comments before we could dive into this episode that I'm really excited about. So, Astremus talked about in the Discord saying, I'm not sure where the discussion, and this is related to, I believe, episode 3 ties in, says, I'm not sure where the discussion about the gender discourse is going at the moment. Then again, it's still early in the series, so there's things that can be built upon. Of course, I mean, we're only on episode 5, y'all. We're only on episode 5, and we got a season 2 coming out later on this year. Like, we're just getting started with the show. But here is some trivia about the development of the manga. The main author is a male, as far as we know. They've expressed for a very long time they wanted to create a shonen series with a female protagonist. You can see this from several of their previous one-shots. During the time of his previous manga serialization to the publishers and the current one, his editor made him finish 100 shoujo series. I mean, if you're going to watch anything to learn about how female characters work, shoujo's the way to go. And I find it so funny because people, a lot of times they think shoujo, they think of bright little pastel colors, and they think of like Sailor Moon. And that's true. There are some really like cutesy shoujo out there. But then there's series like Banana Fish that you're like, oh no, women can have some dark, twisted minds, let me tell you. And so yeah, I definitely like the idea. Now, I don't know if I ascribe to the quality equals quantity ratio here, because it's kind of like in AR where they're like, oh, you have to read 100 books to get into the club. It's like, okay, what were the books you were reading? Were you really paying attention? Are you really getting the tropes down? So kudos to this mangaka for reading 100 shoujo. I'm sure it helped them to get some nuance into how to write dynamic female characters, but I don't know if I'm going to sing them praises yet because we just started the series and I'm like, oh good, you read 100 books. What did you learn from them? So that's going to be kind of the testament of this series, but based on what we've seen so far, I really like the way that Momo and Ken's characters are written and they're dynamic. I really like the grandma character. I love her dynamic as well. I'm really enjoying it so far. So that's good. That's good. I've seen a couple people in the comments after Astremus posted this being like, well, they've read 100 shoujos. So I'm like, okay, but just because you read something doesn't mean that you got what it meant and you applied it. So now let me see it applied. I want your actions to speak, not just, oh, I did this, prove it. Show me in the writing. And so far, DanDaDan has done that. So that's been really exciting. I like that a lot. So yeah. And they said Momo was originally created as the only male character, but the magazine wasn't sure that a female protagonist would work for a shonen series. These editors who are probably Gen X. And so the creator created Ken, or Okarun, and pitched the story as having a main character pair. And honestly, I do like the pair idea. I didn't know how I would feel about it at first when I talked about the last episode about, the story not going through the editors because it featured a female protagonist, and so we had to add Okarun in. I honestly like them as a pair because I believe that you've got to, if you're going to do hashtag feminism, then feminism to me is not women over men, it's women with men equally. That's the whole point of third wave feminism. I'm not going to get into the waves of feminism. I ascribe to the third wave, but I will say that I would much rather in a modern 2025 setting have a pair of characters of two different genders being on equal sides working together than for it to be like Momo being by herself as the female protagonist or Ken being by himself as the male protagonist, because what that usually ascribes in previous shonen series is if we have one of the gender, then the opposite gender is the side character and usually gets relegated to some traditional gender normative tropes that aren't always, progressive. So I like the idea of them being a pair. I like them working together. I like them having to dish things out. I like them talking about sexual things within gender and having a discussion about it. So that's really good. So I'm glad that they are a pair, honestly. And I'm excited. I don't mean to give the mangaka a hard time about the whole 100 shoujo thing. Don't think I'm trying to come at the mangaka, but I always want to see how a work develops. And so far I really like what I see. So we'll see where that goes. AZ639 says, fun facts, Turbo Granny is voiced by Luffy. Luffy's voice actress voices Turbo Granny, which gives me so much joy because, yeah, Luffy's voice actress has been doing Luffy's voice for like nearly 30 years. I know there's a character in One Piece, I won't spoil for those that haven't seen One Piece. How have you not seen One Piece? That just retired, and everybody was like, oh, they're retiring? I'm like, they've been voicing that character for 30 years. Yeah. I'm not surprised. So yeah, I think that that's really interesting. Moomin says for episode 2, and a lot of people have noted this as well, that Ultraman is a big reference in DanDaDan, and Ultraman has a very similar opening in some areas as DanDaDan's opening. There were several openings to Ultraman, but I think this one is the closest to DanDaDan. And they sent a link to that opening in the Patreon comment, and I watched it, and yeah, there are, especially the black outlines of the antagonists that we've seen so far, very similar to Ultraman. I only know of Ultraman through the zeitgeist. I feel like you've made it as far as an anime reference goes if anybody can pick up on what it is, even if they've not watched it, and Ultraman is one of those. So I think that's really cool. I like the idea of referencing, especially, paying homage. And then All Right Meow One for episode 3, I love that handle. It says Momo didn't say she did track. She said even if she trained for months, she couldn't make it to the prefectural meet. Okay, I'm glad you clarified that because I was sitting here being like, Momo's a track star, what? But no, she just said that she could have trained for months and it wouldn't have mattered. I don't know. After episode 4, girl, I think you might be able to do you have the stamina, you could be able to do a track meet. I don't know if it would be sprints, but hurdles, maybe. So yeah, I'm super excited about this episode. I don't know where we're going from here because episode 4 kind of rounded out the initial Turbo Granny arc. The big question I have going into this episode for today is how will Ken, because obviously Ken's going to have to be able to become Turbo Granny form for the rest of the series, right? Or will he get possessed by a different ghost? How is that going to work? So I am very curious to see what we're going to get with that. So we'll have to find out. So anyway, but I'm excited to see what we end up doing this episode and to see if we get those other characters that are in the OP to interact with us. So we'll just have to see. But thank you all so much for the comment and kind words. I'm super excited to see what this episode is going to give us. And we're going to start DanDaDan episode 5. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's go. Oh my God. This episode was great, but I am not going to lie with you all. It was about to drive me up a wall because I was like, no, the miscommunication trope in romance, it is one of my least favorite because it's so frustrating. And I think it's because I'm older. I'm in my mid-30s. So at this point, by the time you've reached adulthood, mid-20s to mid-30s, you get it. You're just like, just fucking talk it out. And it's like, oh my God. And I'm a communications major. So I'm like, you just talk. You just communicate. You just be open and talk about it. And so when you have to watch high school drama of high schoolers not knowing how to navigate the socialness of their relationships, you're just like, I need you all to sit down and talk. And there was a point in this episode where I'm like, this is such bullshit. And you're just doing this to torture us. And it was very obvious they were doing it to torture us because the music kept escalating. Ding, 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 ding. I was like, you're raising my blood pressure. And I need you to stop. I do think it is absolutely adorable. And the way that I think it's really cute how Ken and Momo both handle their awkwardness of, they like each other. They like each other, but it's like, there is a point where I do appreciate that they're not dating, because a lot of times mangaka and creators run themselves into a wall, because once the characters are dating, they're like, well, what do we do? Like I feel like dating makes it harder to write for characters, because then you have to think around like, okay, well, they care about each other, they're dating. So now when something happens, like if we have to face the aliens again, or if some new baddie shows up, now they're going to be worried about not only the care of their partner, but also the situation. So there's all these extra layers. So from a writing perspective, it's a lot easier to just not have them date until the very end of the series, and then have them date and not have to go through all that trouble of extra writing layers, right? But it is frustrating for us, the audience, because we, the audience, can see, we're like, oh, Ken and Momo are in game. They like each other. They know that they like each other, but they're awkward teenagers who don't want to admit it, and it would make the writing more difficult, so they're not going to do that till the very end. I could be wrong. Maybe they'll date before the end of this series, who knows? But for right now, it's like, no. Also, there's too many opportunities for a love triangle and misunderstandings if we don't have them date. So we can't do that. But what I appreciate is that they show how Momo and Ken deal with their attraction towards one another, and they have very different ways of processing those feelings. I like how Ken, who goes about his life not being noticed by his fellow peers, he's like walking to school thinking like, well, how do I talk to her? How do I say good morning? Like, I don't want to do it wrong. I don't want to mess up and get rejected. Meanwhile, the funny thing is, Momo is not worried about being rejected by Ken. She's not worried about that. But she also, or at least she doesn't project it the same way. She might think that she's worried about the rejection, but instead she is focused on her presence in front of her peers, whereas Ken doesn't have that. He doesn't have really peers to worry about that, so it's a very different thing. I feel for Ken, I think, a little bit more than Momo in this episode, because Ken is trying so hard, and I can relate to that, because when you like someone, the last thing you want to do is come across as being, not cool, and you want to be attractive to them. Momo just standing there, though, waiting for him. The one thing I hate for Ken's sake is that he doesn't have the confidence right now at the beginning of the episode to believe that Momo would wait for him. And that's so horrible, because I'm like, Ken, no, you're a great person. You're a wonderful individual. Like, that's what sucks about this episode in terms of the people he's around, because Momo recognizes that he's a great guy and she loves talking to him, and they have such great chemistry. But like, Ken is such a nice person, and he's so sweet, and he's so kind, and he's smart, and he's attentive, and if those girls would give him a chance, they would instantly see that. But Momo's the only one that's seen it, because she's had these experiences with him so far. And then he's like, well, even if we become friends, why would she suddenly start waiting for me at the school gate? And it's like, because she likes you. And he's like, she must be waiting for someone else. And even if she was waiting for someone else, I'm like, Ken, get a little bit of a spine and just ask her and be like, are you waiting for someone else? And she'd be like, no, Baka, I'm waiting for you. Like, him just choosing to ignore her, I was like, I wanted to shake him. I wanted to shake both of them at various points in this episode, because I'm like, what the fudge are y'all doing? And I like that she bumps him like, hey, you're late, let's go. And like, come on, don't be like that. Like, I'm glad that she at least, made that effort at the beginning. And she's trying to talk to him so much about the aliens. And I'm like, dude, she is wanting to communicate with you about aliens. Like, this should be your dream. And he's just like so flustered. He doesn't know what to do. He's like, ah. And then I love that the whole time she's like wanting to talk to him. But here's the thing, when he walks into his classroom, also, for the record, I love the world building of this school. I love how this school is presented as these characters are in a very rural, small town, kind of grungy setting. It's not this big fancy school. You can see how small it is. It reminds me a lot of my own school. Like, the cafeteria is super small and sparse. There's like one stand outside serving food. Everybody just kind of has this like grungy, down to earth look to them. I can relate so much to this high school, and it was really giving me like, I was having nostalgia watching this. But you can kind of see from Ken's environment that the moment he steps into class, everybody's kind of like a bitch to him, and he doesn't it reinforces why he thinks the way that he does, right? Like Momo has all of her girlfriends around her asking her all these questions, whereas Ken is very isolated and alone in his class. Nobody in his class knows what he likes. The fact that Momo came to ask, where's the guy that likes the occult? And they're like, we don't know anybody that likes the occult. I'm like, he sits there reading occult books all day long. How do you not know? Because they don't pay attention to him. So the idea of him being ignored kind of lends him to this idea of why he thinks like, well, why would Momo even like me? Nobody else does. And they've been around me all this time. Why would she be different? Because she is different. But it makes you feel so bad and you understand where he's coming from. I also like how he just keeps filtering through the books now really quickly. Like he's shifting through them very quickly. Like he's not even paying attention to what he's reading. And even the book is upside down that he's looking at because he's more interested in Momo. But again, he processes that different. Whereas Momo, he kind of inwardly in the classroom processes that he misses Momo and wants to talk to her. Momo, meanwhile, is like groaning and making gestures like being impatient. And I just love how they handle it differently. Also, this magazine he's holding with the moon that has the third eye, I'm like, is this going to come back up in the series? Because is it like an Easter egg? I guess we'll see. Time will tell. But yeah, you can just tell how this school, like they're playing volleyball inside the classroom. It's like there's not a lot of adult management going on. But yeah, so the one friend, she doesn't have the makeup on anymore. She's not doing the same makeup. She's taken that off from episode 1. And they both believe that Momo has been, going back to her ex when that is absolutely not the case. She just wants to see Ken. I love that he's drawing and it says Uma in question mark, and he's drawing the crab monster over and over again. And he's like, I want to talk about ghosts. There is another series that I'm watching, The Apothecary Diaries, and in the first episode of that series, there are 2 characters that I won't spoil, but at one point, they both like 2 different things, but they're both in a relationship, and one's like, I want to talk about one thing that you like, and the other's like, I want to talk about something that you like, and it's the same thing. And I was like, that just made my shipper heart like just get even bigger, because I was like, oh yes, like they both want to talk about each other's things. It's so cute. And he's like, I feel for Ken because he just wants to figure out how to talk to Momo. And of course they do the miscommunication where Momo doesn't think until the very end when they're on the bench. She just wants to talk to him and try to find him. He thinks that there's no way she'd want to talk to him. Why would she want to talk to a guy like him? Because she's so pretty. And it's like, really? And then when he goes to like try to find her in the classroom during the break, the one guy's like, yes, speak up. And he doesn't speak up. But this whole I'm fine with them like missing each other because there were literal obstacles in the way, like a crowd of people, or one went one way and one went the other way. But when they're standing right beside each other, I'm sorry. That was so stupid. I was like, they're right there. There is no way that they didn't see each other. No way. And then when they were on the park bench, I was like, if they don't effing see each other, I am going to like have an aneurysm in this episode. So I'm glad that that wasn't the case. I'm glad we didn't have to worry about that. Also, again, the food stand selling the milk bread and then the line, I love it. It's great. But yeah, Ken thinks that she's avoiding him because he thinks he's boring. She did not think that at first. And then she thinks that he's avoiding her because he might want to be isolated and isn't like talking to people. And she thinks that she wasn't thinking about his feelings. He thinks that he's boring. I was like, both of y'all just need to talk. And so I'm glad that they both run into each other. Thank God. I'm like, And then what does she say? He's like, why am I such a wimp? And she's like, why am I always like this? Like they both have these insecurities about themselves, which anybody would, right? Anytime you like someone, I feel like the first thing you go to is, am I good enough for that person? Am I going to be good enough to be in this relationship? And the answer is just to be yourself, and they'll either like it or they won't, right? That's the thing. It's the hard truth about relationships, but if you are yourself around people, they're either going to like it and appreciate it, or they are not. And the hard part is when you like them and you are yourself and they don't like you back. That's the rejection part. That's the hard part. But you can't not be yourself, because it's always going to bite you in the ass if you aren't. If you try to be something that you're not, it may temporarily work, but eventually it's going to bite you in the ass. Every time. So I was like, I want Momo to be more open with Ken And I want her, and she does it by the end. I'm so glad they reconciled this episode because I was gonna be really pissed if they didn't. And I thought this series was going one direction for a second, and it may still go that direction, but I was like, but we'll talk about it when we get to it. But I'm glad they talked it out and are friends and are still, we'll get to the kiss scene here in a second. But I want Momo to feel like she can always be honest with Ken because he's a nice guy and he will be honest with her back. And I want Ken to be more confident in expressing himself and those feelings, because I think that if both of them can do that, they'll both realize like, oh, hey, yeah, we do like each other. So if you pause it just right, they did kiss each other. If you pause it just right, they had a Naruto Sasuke moment. They had a Naruto Sasuke moment where they do kiss each other because I paused it right at the right time and their teeth clacked against each other. So I just need it to happen where it's not where it's not an accident. I need these two to have a romantic kissy moment by the end of, it probably won't happen this season, but season 2 is coming out later this summer. So maybe by the end of season 2. I need them to have a kissy moment, like that's real and romantic and not just an accident. But I don't think it's gonna happen this season, which is sad. But yeah, and of course she's like, shit, I kissed him on accident, and he's like, oh my god. And she's like, oh, I found you. And he's like, oh yeah, same here, Miss Ayase. Oh my gosh. He's like, what are you here for? Like, and of course the friends catch him. And she, does not want, and at first they're talking it out like, oh, I thought you were avoiding me. And she's like, same here. And you think it's going to be like this little moment because things get awkward and they're realizing like, oh, hey, I missed you too. And then that's when the friends show up and say that they were kissing. And of course, Momo's reaction is not the right one to take, where she's like, oh, I'd never kiss a dimwit like him. And he's like, yeah, I would never do that with a stupid person like her. And they both get onto each other. And honestly, she's like, you don't get the right to reject, you baldy. I do like the idea that they don't get awkward around each other and they kind of play it off and they're like, and they banter back and forth. I like that, but I don't like it to the extent where they hurt each other's feelings. And that's kind of where it immediately goes because she gets her feelings hurt. And he's just like, well, damn it. He's like, I didn't, because he's like, I couldn't help retort to her provoking, and he's like, there's so many things I want to talk to her about. And it's like, Ken wasn't being true to himself. Momo wasn't being true to herself. And then they both realize that, but Momo kind of doubles down on it because she doesn't want to be embarrassed by her friends. She doesn't want her friends. It is kind of like, I definitely agree with Ken when he's like, why are you saying you're embarrassed to be around me? Aren't we friends? He's in the right 100% about that. And I got kind of mad at Momo because I'm like, Momo, why do you care what your friends think? You didn't before. Why do you care now? You didn't before when you were dating the loser. Why do you care now when you could potentially be dating an actually really nice guy? And again, it's that insecurity and that uncertainty that Momo has that she projects in a way that, she goes the wrong way with it. Also, I will say, again, we talked a few episodes ago about like, men, do you notice when your penises are there? And they're like, yes. Do you notice your balls? I guess that's the next question. Female viewer asking the audience, do men notice that they have balls? Do you know that they're there? Because he's clearly gone to the bathroom since then. But I also think it's very interesting that he doesn't notice the balls. And this whole episode is about both of them getting the balls, getting the courage to talk to one another. And it also is the moment where he's like possibly has some sexual interest in Momo, perhaps, that he notices he doesn't have balls. And it's like, But anyway, her friends are all teasing her about kissing in the courtyard. And she's like, no, it was an accident. And she's like, it's nothing like that. We're just friends. And they're like, no, he's an otaku, total four eyes. And the thing of it is that she wanted to talk to him all day long. And then all of a sudden he shows up. And I love that he's like, my balls. It's like, we need to talk about the balls. And I kept wanting her to immediately go talk to him. And of course she's embarrassed because she doesn't want to admit that she likes him. She doesn't know what to do with those feelings. And she doesn't want to face possible rejection from him, as you would expect. But I was mad that she shunned him away. And when he said, are you embarrassed to be around me? And even her friends are like, hey, like, sorry, we're making fun of you, but he's a nice guy. If he's just a friend, you'd let it slide with a wisecrack like you always do. But he's clearly not just a friend because you're getting flustered about it, right? And his look when he walks away, I feel so bad for Ken. I'm like, no. And so I was really worried about him and her. And I was like, do not tell me you've led me on for 4 episodes really loving this couple and then suddenly having their argument and breaking up. And then that's when he bumps into this girl, the pink-haired girl. And at first, I thought she was going to be the total, which she is the total opposite of Momo, just not in the way I thought at first. At first, she's all like, oh my gosh, oh, look there. And just is a total sweetie. And you think, okay, she's going to be totally opposite of Momo. Momo's kind of like tomboyish and gruff and like, all right, let's go, and gritty. And this girl's like very touchy, very feely, and just, then you find out she's a bitch. Which is not Momo. Momo comes off like a bitch, but then she's like, no, actually, I'm a really nice girl that, has some insecurities and whatever, but she's like, I'm actually a nice person. I just come off gruff and, kind of tomboyish. This girl, she's a player and uses her feminine wiles to tease people. And I'm like, bitch, that's not cool. And I'm glad that Momo hears her and is like, like, of course, because we have the jealousy trope where Momo sees her like acting that way. And then the girl's like, oh, can you believe that guy? He fell for me back there. I'm sure a guy like that never had a decent conversation with a girl anyway. And I like that when Momo's like earrings glisten, that's when it's like a sign she's pissed. I love that. Like the little telekinesis making them twitch. Because Momo was like, look, I know I was in the wrong today, but you just met this guy for 5 seconds and were already a bitch to him. That's not cool. I don't like that. And her making the wash pan land on her, what I thought was going to happen was that Ken was going to go over and be like, oh, are you okay? And it was going to make him like her even more. I'm glad Momo grabbed him and was like, no, let's go. Even though it was the jealousy trope and everything, I'm glad she was like, no, stay away. Because once you find out that that girl is totally playing him, it's like, no. At least Momo has genuine feelings. She's just not expressing them the best way. That girl had no feelings. She was just being a bitch and playing him. And it's like, no, that's not cool. That's not cool at all. Although I wonder, because she's in the opening, so we're going to see her more. I wonder if she's going to try to create this love triangle with Ken. And if Momo's like, you don't even like him. I'm hoping that's not the case. I don't want a stupid love triangle that's not real. If she really liked Ken, if she genuinely had feelings for him, which she may develop, but I don't know. I feel like she's going to be shipped with the other guy. I would be okay with it. But the fact that she doesn't have feelings and she's just being a bitch, unless she's just, doing what Momo just did and projecting this. Oh yeah, I was just playing him. I don't really like him. But I want Ken and Momo to be in game. So pink-haired girl needs to go find the other dude and be with him. Go away. But yeah, her just hitting her with the wash pan was great. I loved that. And then she's like, nope, we're going to go. She's like, let's go. And then she says, you're looking sharp with the, just to prove to her, she's like, no, actually he has been talking to people. And she says, I guess stupid girls will never understand your charm, Okaroon. Some more fit to have wash tubs falling on their heads than guys falling for them. And all the girls watch her walk away with him. So yeah. So I am glad after this fact, because I was like, okay, Momo, now you've had your jealousy trope. You've gotten Ken. Now what are you going to do? They finally, thank God, have this conversation. And she's like, and I love that she apologizes. She's like, I had the worst attitude towards you. I'm so sorry. She's like, after the incident that was like a kiss, I got all flustered. And Ken's like, okay. And then she says to him, she's like, I'm sorry I was so embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed about being friendly to you, Okaroon. I'm glad she says that. And he's like, oh, I don't mind at all. I'm glad she finally talks to him. I want Ken to have the confidence, and maybe since he can transform into his Turbo Granny form, that will give him the confidence, because in that form, he seems like so low key and doesn't care that I feel like he would be like, I really like you. Like, are you going to reject me or what? Like, I'm ready for that. I'm ready for him in that form to be like, I like you. Okay. Go ahead and reject me. I'm waiting for it. Like, I'm waiting for that moment to happen and her being like, what? So, but I like that they finally talked this out. and we're able to be friends. And he's like, I'm happy I can make amends with you. I'm glad that they were able to talk it out and be friends. And then he's like, oh, by the way, we need to talk about something important. And then I like that they both kind of look at each other, and he's like, anyway, that's trivial. We have a huge problem. So I like that he's like, okay, we've made amends. We've figured it out. We both like being around each other. We're still friends. Good to go. I don't have balls. Which is great. I was like, I wanted all of this to get resolved, so I'm so happy that it happened. I am sad that Momo is laughing at him not having balls. Like, she not only laughed all the way back to her grandmother's house, I'm sure, but then she was laughing as she changed clothes. I'm like, girl, leave poor Ken alone. I feel bad for Ken. I feel so bad for him, right? And he's like, well, the shaft was back. My penis was back, so I thought that, I was reassured. And I love that the grandma's like, shaft, what do you think, it's huge or something? What if it is? We don't know. He's like, you've never even seen it. I'm also like, Grandma, quit trying to take a peek. And then she reveals, even though she sounds perverted, she's going to look in his soul and says, yeah, there's something in there. I am so excited that the cat is Turbo Granny. I am so glad that wasn't spoiled because that was such a great reveal. I love the fact that it's Turbo Granny, and also, of course, we have to use the shonen logic of being like, well, how does this work? How are we going to explain this? And I'm fine with it. I'm fine that it's Turbo Granny's consciousness is in the cat doll, the lucky cat doll. The consciousness is there, but her powers are still within Ken. I'm fine with that. And it checks out because he doesn't have his balls. So the powers are conditional on whether your weenie is gone or another reproductive organ, which goes along with the idea that the women that were sexually assaulted, this is the curse on a man for doing such things, even though Ken has done nothing wrong. I like the tie into that. It all checks out. It's just like, my only thing is, where are the balls? And are they just lying around on the ground somewhere? What? How? Did the aliens pick them up? I feel like it's all going to come full circle with the aliens. I feel like those banana aliens are not gone. They're going to tie back into this because they are going to be like, we were defeated by a girl. Now we have to come back again. I absolutely am convinced that they're going to be tied to this. Maybe they picked up the balls somewhere because they're all into like bananas and reproduction and all that. I don't know. But I love the idea that the cat spirit is in the lucky cat. I love it. And I love that Momo's ability pulls it out and puts it in the cat. The animation of the cat was amazing. And it just running off. I love it. I live. And then her grabbing the cat there in the floor. You scummy old hag. I love it. It's just such a great moment. And seeing the cat being forced. And it all makes sense. The cat left and got into his body and was going to stay there. I like that Ken gets mad because he's like, you mean you're going to stay in here until you could recover and then use my body again? Excuse me? I love that. At one point, Momo stands in front of Ken. And the one thing I like about Ken and Momo is them being side by side. I don't want either of them to overshadow the other. So at first she stands in front of Ken like she's protecting him. But then he gets beside her and he's like, hand over my balls and give them to me. And she's like, no. And she's like, if I die, your balls will never go back to normal, which was kind of a lie because she doesn't even have them. They're somewhere else. And then her telling him to like, go get a kitchen knife and stab them is like, that's what makes him mad. Cause he's like, no, he's like, I'm not going to do what you want. And then I love the idea of him transforming with the cape and everything in his school uniform. I love it. It's great. And then him being like, stuff like that is too much stress and it makes me wilt. And she's like, I thought we drove Turbo Granny out of you. So how does this exactly work? And even Turbo Granny doesn't know what's going on. And then the other grandma's like, yeah. So I drove the consciousness of Turbo Granny out, but the weenie power, it's still there. And I love the little chibi version of him. It's so cute. Your spiritual power is still inside the kid. So just the consciousness was transferred to the doll. And I love that then the grandmother says, I'm the only one that can return the consciousness to its original place. So you're kind of at my mercy. I I love the grandmother being like, so if you want to get your power back, you better start kissing ass real hard. I like that stipulation because that gives us, the audience, the knowledge that Turbo Granny is going to help them, because Turbo Granny cannot get the power back from Ken without the other grandmother's help, which adds an extra stake that we can't let anything happen to the other grandma. Otherwise, Turbo Granny's going to be stuck in that cat forever. So there's that. And I love that in that moment, Ken calls the grandmother cool. And she's like, how did you transform? He's like, I don't know. I just got really mad. And then I could. Meanwhile, I just love the grandmother just whacking the cat over and over again. So funny. I could make a sex joke there, but I'm going to be tasteful and not do that. Just like, you're petty, but to be honest, I can't hate you. I like that Momo talks to Turbo Granny and is like, look, you're a petty old hag, and what you're doing to Ken is not cool, but I get why you're here. The feeling of sympathy for those girls is the same after all. And I like Turbo Granny just kind of looks at her like, oh. Like, someone was like, I get why you're a ghost. I get what your MO is. I appreciate it, but we need to get along and work here. Ken is not the same as the guys that have murdered those girls. So she's like, just give the power back and we're fine. And she's like, you damn punks, fine, I would, but I don't have his balls. I dropped him somewhere. And they're like, really? Really? So they gave us a preview for the next episode. I do not know what is going to be happening in the next episode, but I saw a glimpse of the pink-haired girl, so I'm sure she's not out of this yet. I mean, she's in the OP, so we know that she's going to be here, so, Anyway, I was really happy with how this episode played out. The miscommunication trope is one of my least favorite in all of romance because it's so easily remedied. And I know for them being I know the main comments people will say is, well, they're in high school and they don't know. And I am aware of that. It's just, as someone who has been through high school and is very much an adult now, it's like, it's so frustrating because you look back on those high school days and you're like, man, if you had just done X, Y, and Z, would have solved 90% of your problems. But hindsight's 2020 and kids don't know. So, and the grandmother's not exactly the best resource for asking about such things, honestly. So anyway, I'm super excited to hear your thoughts down below, but I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care. And yeah, I'm so excited to see what's going to happen next week's episode 6. I'm going to wait for your comments, but then I'm going to check out episode 6. And I'm so excited to see what's going to happen next on DanDaDan. See you then. Bye.